Cambridge City Council member who was running for re-election, and then ended up co-managing the re-election campaign for a Boston City Councilor the next year. And that was really how politics got in my blood. I was, back then we were calling volunteers off of index cards, and everything was by the phone and in person and on paper. Today's campaigns are so high-tech, it's hard for even a relatively young fellow like me to keep up with it. So that was my first taste of politics. I ended up going to law school and worked a bunch of different types of careers in the law. Finally, when we moved to Durham in 2007 and we had our two kids, when my second daughter was born and just, getting able to, my wife could handle both kids, that's when I decided it was really time to get involved in politics. So I volunteered with the Durham Democratic Party for a little while, became a precinct chair, got involved in the statewide party. I served as the state party's treasurer, and it was during that time that the Durham City Council election of 2015 came around. And so that kind of was my path in politics, a very early age as a campaign volunteer and staffer, and then later in life came back to it as a sort of a Democratic Party guy in Durham and in North Carolina. And so that's kind of shaped a lot of my perspective on the issues that are important, issues to working people, issues to African Americans. These are the things that have really driven me in politics, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, and certainly in my 4 years on the city council.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And in the 4 years in the city council, what would you say is the thing that you are most proud of what you as a city council member has done in terms of what you've been able to accomplish so far? So if somebody was to ask you, what have you accomplished that you're most proud of, what would that be for you in those 4 years?
Well, I think I'm really, really proud of the 4 budgets that we've put together since I've been in the city council. We have increased dramatically our commitment to preserving and constructing affordable homes for working families. That we are just leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 4 years ago. We've also been really, really responsible with public dollars in terms of economic incentives. When I was running for city council, the then council, which I was not on, approved a couple of incentive deals for downtown development in Durham that I thought were really too rich, that paid developers too much in tax incentive to get the new construction. And since I was elected, along with my friend Jillian, the city manager hasn't come to us with those kinds of really, really expensive, rich incentive deals, because I think, number one, the city manager knows we don't need it, but number two, there's just no appetite for that on the council right now. And I think we've found better ways to spend public dollars. The other thing that we've done is we've kept the tax rate pretty modest. I think one of the things I noticed when I looked at the tax rates over the last number of years is that I think we are on average about, over the 4 years I've been on the council, the tax rate's gone up 8%. Not a year, just over those 4 years. That's about 2% a year. That's really modest. Last year we didn't even have a tax increase. So we kept city taxes flat. So I'm really proud of the budgets that we put together. The thing I'm least proud of, I'll tell you, it's funny, we had this is going to sound a little obscure, we had a rezoning petition that came before the council, I want to say about 2 years ago. And it was a petition to rezone a street corner off of Highway 54 and Barbie Road. And the developer wanted to make it a commercial zoning, but it was currently residential. And I didn't like the idea of creating a new commercial node at that intersection. But I could tell from the comments of everybody else in the council that everybody else wanted to do it. And so what I regret most isn't that I voted against the rezoning, which passed 6-1. It's that I didn't explain why I was doing it. I didn't give my colleagues the opportunity to benefit from my ideas. And what happened is, about a year later, they came back to us, the same developer, and said, you know what, we couldn't market it as commercial. It didn't make sense. We want to switch it back to residential rezoning. And so I think I was right. And if I had explained my reasoning and entered into a dialogue with my colleagues, even though the other 6 of them wanted to do it, maybe I could have changed some minds. But at a minimum, I regret that because I don't feel like I did my job. I should, if I'm going to vote a certain way, I need to explain why. And so that's what I regret the most.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the things I've noticed about Durham, I think I made this comment to a friend of mine, not necessarily on this show before, but just to a friend in a routine conversation, is that, we talk about the wave of diversity and the wave of youth vote that is existing on the national scene. People like AOC, people like Ilion, and folks like that, and they're just, and two examples, but there are many others as well. I would argue that to some degree that Durham might have been ahead of the curve, because I think that some of that youth leadership that everybody is talking about within the Democratic Party, Durham was doing it slightly before the time that they started getting noticed on the national scene. Is that a mistake on my part in thinking that, or would you agree with that thought?
Oh, I'd absolutely agree with that. I think all you have to do is look at the makeup of the Durham City Council. The day before I was sworn in December of 2015 and today, and you will see Durham City Council that is younger. We have a majority of working parents on the council today, and it's amazing. So youth has definitely been served in Durham over the last 4 years, and I think it's a trend that's going to continue. I think you're going to continue to see young people stepping up to make a difference in their community. They've always done that, but I think, and young people have always been involved in politics and always run for office, but I think we have really seen, especially like I said in Durham, the fact that young folks really feel like they can run for any office that they're qualified for, that they can put a message out there, that they can inspire voters, perhaps also inspire donors to support their campaigns, because that's also really important. But I think Durham has always been a place where young folks had an outsized voice in our politics. And I think, like I said, just look at the city council and how it's changed over the last 4 years. I went from being the second youngest member of the city council when I was elected in 2015 to I'm just right in the middle of the pack. I think I'm third oldest now. And that's just because we elected young folks in the interim. And I think that's good for our politics. It's good for our city because I think if anybody is going to have an eye to what the future needs to hold for a city like Durham, it's our young people. And so it's something I'm really excited and proud to be a part of.
Definitely. And one of the things I've talked about with Jillian on the show, as well as other guests, I think I even might have mentioned it to Zainab and everything, but I was just wondering, how do you think we're doing in terms of like the actual cross-generational dialogue, though? Because I do know that sometimes that can be an issue, because sometimes I wonder if the old guard in leadership doesn't necessarily want to give the young guard the kind of respect that they probably deserve or listen to their voice, and vice versa. So I was just wondering if you ever run across that in some of your conversations, where you sometimes feel that people are not giving you the kind of respect or not listening to you because they feel that you're new at the game, young in the game. It's kind of the argument that people give to AOC when she makes statements and everything. I know I've got a friend in the West Coast that is oftentimes saying that she should have sat back and not jumped into the fray as much as she's jumped into the fray, because they felt that she hadn't earned her time yet. And I know that was part of the argument that people had with Pierce when he ran for mayor.
Absolutely. No, I think that's right. But I think, to come back around to that, I think Pierce Freelon has become a really critical player in our politics right now. He's the vice chair of the Human Relations Commission, which is one of our most powerful and influential city boards. And he is seeking the appointment to Floyd McKissick's Senate seat if and when Floyd is actually appointed and confirmed by the Senate to serve in the Utilities Commission. So I think, Pierce Freelon is someone who has limitless potential, has more inspiration in his pinky than I do in my entire body, and is just someone that I'm really proud to call a friend, and really glad that he is working and living and trying to make Durham a better place. But to go back to your first point, I think, I think Durham's special version of that, you haven't paid your dues, is how long have you lived here? I've lived in a lot of different places, but I don't know that I've ever been to a place that loves that line as much as Durham does. I remember in 2014, as a private citizen, I went to a meeting of the Durham Crime Cabinet and made some perhaps intemperate remarks as a member of the public about certain aspects of things that were going on in Durham. After the meeting, a much older gentleman asked me how long I'd been here and said I might want to wait a while before I started criticizing people. And the next year I was elected to the city council. I think, different communities treat that in different ways, but I think that strain of, you haven't paid your dues, you haven't lived here long enough, you're not from here, you don't understand what we need. I think over time, I voters respect values, and they respect positions, and they respect passion. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter where you're from. Not everybody had to be born to be in Durham. I chose to live here. My family, my wife and I chose to move here and raise our girls here because this was the community we wanted to make a family in. And so, like I said, I think voters respond to issues. They respond to people's positions, their passions, and their values. And I think the time when natives to a particular place, native-born people, having the upper hand in politics, I think that time is largely past. And that doesn't mean, of course, it doesn't mean that we don't respect and appreciate the wisdom that comes from having lived in a place. Many of my very best friends and folks, kind of political touchstones, are people who have lived in Durham for a long, long time. But I think in terms of that kind of place checking or date checking or the kind of the pay your dues kind of mentality, I think that has much less salience in Durham than it ever has. And I think part of it is because of that youth movement that we talked about before. I just think people see young folks getting it done, and I think it's a good thing for our city.
And Durham is such an interesting place because you're right. Durham is one of those cities that's definitely a historical city. I mean, I was born here in Durham, raised in a little town called Warrenton, but have lived the vast majority of my life in the city of Durham. And I've noticed that Durham is definitely very much, like you said, very attached to its history. But then there's also a lot of transplants in Durham, like yourself and like others that are coming here for the various business opportunities that are here, some that are tied into the history, like Black Wall Street and things like that. But then, I mean, we've got all these tech companies that are coming here on a regular basis. So I do think that Durham is a mixture of both people that are diehard Durham residents and longtime Durham natives, but also a lot of people that are first-generation Durham residents that have never, born someplace else, maybe come here for school, whether that was Duke Central or Durham Tech or one of our outlying schools in some of the other towns like UNC and State or even Shaw and St. John's. But then they wind up staying in the area because of the great opportunities that are here business-wise.
No, absolutely. And I think, the mayor, Mayor Schul, and our Mayor Pro Tem Jillian Johnson have a very similar story of having been born and raised in Virginia, coming to Durham for college at Duke, becoming involved in activism on campus, and deciding this was a place they really wanted to stick around and make a go of. And I think that is in our DNA. Durham's always been a striving city. We're not located in the middle of a field. We're located on a railroad. That's why we're here, because people come and they go. And transplants like me can also add value to this community. At the same time, one of my closest friends on the council is Renetta Alston, whose family, the Alston family, is legendary in the city of Durham, and she has people buried in almost every cemetery in town, and can talk with the best of them. And she is our youngest council member. So I think that youth movement can go both ways in terms of the whole, long time, native resident and transplant thing. But I think one of the best things about our city council right now is that we've got so many different kinds of people. We've got avowed agnostics, we've got atheists, we've got a preacher, we've got people of faith like my wife and I are Episcopalian, our kids are in the choir, and so I think aside from the racial, ethnic, gender diversity that we have on the council, we're also come at our problems from a lot of different perspectives. And like many people have said, that is a source of great strength for us because we don't always agree on specific policy items, but we're all pulling in the same direction. And I think we all know what progress looks like for a city like Durham. I think we all know what equity looks like for a city like Durham. We just got to try to get there as best we can together. And I think for the most part, we've done a good job with that.
Yeah, because even among orientations, the council seems to have a diversity. Because I know definitely there are members that are other lifestyles as well. I want to say Burnett is definitely a part of the LGBT community, and I think there are other members that claim to be part of different communities as well. So it seems like we definitely cross the boundaries among the orientation realms as well, not just among race, not just among religion, not just, I would even argue, probably even among class, because I want to say there are some of you that are in jobs that might be a little bit more affluent than others in terms of the diversity of